Welcome back to Ancient Aliens in Modern Times. We're your hosts, Melanie Wild and
Stephanie Yelovich.
Yay! All right,
Yay,
here we are.
Let's get into it. I forgot to say that, but that's fine because we're going to anyways.
Episode 4. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited.
Me too.
Yeah, so at the time we're recording this, we just released our first episode. So we're super pumped, especially on all the feedback we've gotten already, which is really amazing. I super
Can
appreciate
I share my
the
favorite feedback after?
Share it right now.
Well, the feedback that we've got from both of our mothers and their friends are that we swear too much. So we've already offended people. So we're doing what we were talking about in level 1, in episode 1. So we'll aim not to swear as much, but please know. And I was saying this to Melanie earlier. I trust people more when they swear. I don't know, because I feel like they're not as guarded. They're not keeping things in or worrying about what people are saying. They're just like, fuck it. Here I am.
Here I am.
So that's feedback number 1.
Feedback number 1, we curse too much. We'll try to be respectful and turn it down a little, but no promises. We are who we are. And my mom did have that caveat when she gave me the feedback was, you did preface, if you're offended, that's on you, not us. But anyway.
True. My mom just said, we're old, so that was her excuse. So shout out to Katie and Linda. You're not old. You just, you're just sharing how you feel. It's cool.
Yeah. Thanks, Katie and Linda. We appreciate it. Honestly, it was my own feedback too. When I listened back and
you did
messaged Steph, I was like, I think I cursed too much.
I love your sailor mouth.
I love it too. But yeah, okay. So we super appreciate the feedback. Keep it coming because we are working out all of the kinks still, and
absolutely
we want this. Yeah, we want this to be a really great experience for our listeners. So by now you've heard our 2 episodes on Reiki and what brought us together, and we are super excited for the next 2 episodes because we are going to be discussing creation stories from a multitude of different perspectives. So in this episode today, Steph is bringing to the table the Atlantean creation story. And I will be bringing in the Gnostic creation story. So I think our goal here in the next episode, Steph's going to talk about the Egyptian creation story. And I'm going to talk about the Sumerian or Anunnaki creation story. So what we're attempting with bringing these different perspectives of the same story to our awareness is to find the overlaps, right? We want to see where they cross over and where we can find similarities. So everything that we're presenting today is not necessarily what we believe to be true, but something that we find interesting and there's curiosities there to explore. So just keep that in mind that if you're offended because this is not the truth that you know, it might not be the truth we know either. It's just something that we want to explore. So let's start. Steph, tell us about Atlantis. What's going on? How did it start?
So this creation story, I'm just going to preface with kind of where I found this information and where this came from. So I happened upon this really special book. It all began with a book called The Children of the Law of One and the Lost Teachings of Atlantis. And it's really funny because it came up in my Amazon cart. When you like something or you put something in your cart and then it says, suggest other suggested things, right? So I had actually never seen this piece of literature on Atlantis. I think myself and many others have found a lot. There is a lot out there, a lot of books, whether they be from kind of a channeled spiritual capacity or whether they were coming from research and the actual kind of archaeology and history of what's been found. This particular book is really unique in that it was written by a man, his name is John Peniel. Forgive me if I'm saying his name wrong. This book was actually published in 1997, so it is not really new. But what I like is that some of the things I'm reading, they say, it's not happening yet, but it will be soon. At this time in the existence of Earth, the things that he's talking about are already happening. Or not he, but the prophecies are talking about. So what's really fascinating about this story and where this information comes from is this man was a seeker, and he had studied multiple religions. He'd studied theology. He'd studied even yogic paths, right? So he was just trying to immerse himself in finding the truth, his origins, where humanity came from, etc. And he was never really satisfied. And it's like it's kind of a fantasy story in a way, in that he was actually shown his TV turned on and there was static on the TV. And this face appeared and told him of the existence of this pre-Buddhist temple that existed in the Tibetan mountains. And he was shown and given the directions to find this particular temple, or monastery, I should say, more so. Excuse me. And he went. He actually took his entire body there and his existence and his life, and he went and found this place. And he basically was trained as an adept or as an initiate, lived in this temple for multiple years, and learned in the old school apprenticeship temple model where you would live on the premises and you would dedicate your entire life to learning these teachings. So what I love is he sets up the framework for how he learned this information. And then what I really especially like is how he shares the scrolls or the information. We know in the Gnostic teachings and in the teachings from the Essenes, all of this information was found on scrolls that were preserved for thousands of years. And this man was accessing and holding these scrolls of
Crazy.
information that had been protected for thousands of years. And so basically what he explains was that when Atlantis fell, these teachers went to multiple places over the earth, one of the first places being Egypt, or Kem as it was called. And so we're going to see already in just what I've learned and researched about is that there is already overlap in why we're talking about specific creation stories, obviously Egypt being one that's going to come in our next episode. So he's coming from the perspective of an actual novice or student that had learned this information as it was taught to him, and he's delivering this information. And basically what he explains is that this I don't want to say religion. He called it a spiritual. There was a really beautiful way of explaining it that I'm now not able to find off the top of my head or notes, but a spiritual doctrine, that's what it was, I think. Not doctrine. I'll find it later and I'll explain it better. But basically this was a way of being for the people that came from Atlantis, and they were called the children of the law of one. And I'm going to break that down and explain why that is the case. So what I'm going to do, I'd love to read the creation story, but it's too long. So I'm not going to read the whole thing out loud, but I've kind of taken points and gone
Perfect.
throughout to be able to break some of this down for everybody. There's a lot of information in here, but again, I feel like you're going to be finding overlap as we go through. So I'm just going to start. I'm going to read some quotes from it, but stop me if I'm getting too in depth or I'm going too far with what I'm
I'm
reading.
not gonna
But I'm
stop
going to
you. I love
start
this.
I'm going to start with like the initial sentences that he shares. And so what he says is, I've edited the following story somewhat, adapting some modern English terminology and structure just for ease of understanding, but the teaching is fully intact and very close to the original translation. Even so, you will not be able to truly or completely realize the meaning of our history and the separation from oneness, until you are free from your earthly bonds and the limitations of your own brain and consciousness. But, I love his humor, what can you do other than work with what you've got? So it begins this way. Know your true self, and you will know the true story. Know your whole self, and you will know the wholeness of the truth. All is one, there is no other. Thus it always was, and thus it always shall remain. We once experienced only oneness, one being with no divisions or separate parts. There was no time, no space, nothing other than the us. When you are only one, there is only you, nothing else to interact with. In order to experience interaction, to experience being with someone else or to experience play, the one divided within itself, duplicating the one, thus creating many ones or many beings within the one. So, what I love is he notes that this is what modern science calls the Big Bang. So,
Mhm.
I think what's really beautiful to note about this story is that it talks about oneness to start, to begin, that everything was created and it was of one main source. What I absolutely love is that he then we divide from the one, and he speaks about, or this teaching, the creation story speaks about how we started to shift and divide, but through something called vibration, as we know. So he says, by vibration was it done, division, multiplication, and expansion of the one. So this is where we're starting to see that shift, and where what we all knew to be the original creator or the original thing was this one source. Not in the beginning was the word. There's more than that. We didn't have words yet. So so next he talks about the actual present consciousness of existence. So at the time, our existence, as close as you can comprehend in your present consciousness, as beings of spirit or energy. So he speaks about the fact that we weren't in bodies to start, that we started as just energy. Right? So there's already overlap here, but I will
Oh, yeah,
continue
I'm,
on.
like, keeping quiet
That's
at
why
all
I'm
of the
like,
things that
your
I'm
brain is gonna be popping right now, my girl.
it's exploding. I'm so excited.
Yeah. I'm so excited too, it's amazing. So then next he moves to, and I'm paraphrasing a bit, I'm also skipping ahead because there's a lot. When we came upon the world of the earth, we had no comparison, no experience of the like, no expectation of what would be. So, what he's speaking about here is this pull, right, to the 3D, to the material existence. And he speaks about the first wave of souls to materialize, or the teaching speaks about, I shouldn't say he. It's the first wave so there was a first wave that came through. And what I really appreciate about this teaching that separates it a lot from kind of our, I'm going to say, more modern biblical way of looking at creation is there was no blaming. There was no blaming on a woman. There was no temptation that was pulling them in. He talks about it in the wave of like naivete, right? Like these souls were just really wanting to have an experience, and they wanted to come down, and they were drawn down to this place to enter this vibrational spectrum of matter in the time space of Earth, of Earth Mother, right? So, what he actually speaks about, and now here's where we have to keep an open mind and where you're going to start to think about overlap, is that we first entered bodies that were hybrid bodies. They were not human and they were not animal, but both. So, what is taught is that the animal realm, they basically had descended into matter and created these beings that were those of an animal and human combination. So bird head, human body; Norse body, human head; goat head, human body; or fishtail and human torso. So if we look at the Greek and Roman mythology, he speaks about the fact that later things like centaurs, minotaurs, mermaids, these were actually the first beings that existed on this planet. And they, because of the fact that we were coming into this dense 3D matter, they were choosing these beings that were just sensation. So they were experiencing sensation in this simplistic way. And so then we move to this kind of next stage where, unfortunately, these ones, even our close kindred, had no way of knowing that as soon as they hardened their thought forms into matter, becoming these creatures, that they would lose all awareness, all consciousness of most things beyond their new bodies and immediate environment. So now, here we're talking about the amnesia. This is where we
Hmm.
start to forget. And this is where, as we enter into this dense 3D matter form, that's all that exists for us, right? So, again, going back to the fact that I really appreciate that this story is not blaming it on a woman tempting someone to eat an apple, and that's why they fall and the whole world is mad at that one woman named Eve. What he says is it was truly just, it was curiosity. And it was truly this lure that kind of brought them there because they just wanted to experience sensation.
Hmm.
And so they basically became stuck in this way. And so they were cut off from the consciousness of the one. So now we're talking about separation and division. So now we have a new consciousness forming that is not a consciousness of oneness, it is a consciousness of separateness. And what he states is that we actually originally were of angelic consciousness. So here comes in this idea of the fallen angel, which looks very differently now that you have this background, in my opinion, than
Hmm.
just like people who fell from the sky and got stuck here. There's reasons. So let's just see here. So then we have to talk about the fact that now we have this fixed focus, which is part of the separateness. So it's creating a reversed polarity in comparison to the consciousness of the one. So this also affected intelligence. So these beings became very low intelligence, and their existence also was slightly disruptive to the earth plane and the flow of nature. So now we're kind of also altering what has always been. Um, then we're going to talk about the second wave. So, not every being projected themselves into these matter being bodies or these humanimals, he actually calls them, or they're called in the creation story. And so, those of us who did not project ourselves into matter were quite aware of the predicament and fates that had befallen our kin. So, we decided to save them, no matter what the cost. And we knew that we could only do this if we projected ourselves into a form of matter onto the Earth Mother. So, this is one of my favorite parts. This is also one I'm going to recommend everybody have an open mind because I personally have not thought of or heard of this being the same as this other being that I'm going to mention. But it is taught that this rescue mission was led by the great being known as the Atlantean Emiliaus, or Emiliaus, I could be saying that wrong, spelled Mailiaus, then later known as Thoth, and eventually known as Jesus. The second entering into the plains of the Earth Mother began. So let's just stop there for a second because that's not something that I had ever considered, was that this being was the same. We are I think many of us in this world of seeking, very connected to many of these different beings. I had never considered the fact that Thoth could also be considered Yeshua or Jesus. So just keep an open mind to that. And
Yes,
I'm
this
gonna
is.
move on.
I have so many things I
I
want to
know,
say.
it's
Okay, keep
intense, I
going.
know, I cannot wait to hear what you have to say. So, they projected themselves onto Earth, again, rescue mission, right? Led by our what I love too is he's referred to as the Grand Master as well. So, not just Thoth, not just this being of ascension or teaching, but as the Grand Master of Atlantis. So, what a title,
Okay.
right? What happened is we created these thought form bodies that were semi etheric. So they were matter, but not fully matter. They were able to function on all vibrational planes of matter. They were very intent on maintaining our consciousness of oneness, which was a manifestation that we achieved more or less successfully. And what's interesting is that the numbers 2 and 5 are specifically mentioned in this creation story. So, speaking of 5 races being created, later the 2 sexes being created, each being having 5 appendages. 2 legs, 2 arms, 1 head, 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 of the many organs, and 5 fingers and toes. So, what's also stated is that those who manifested in Atlantis with Thoth or Emiliaus fared the best, but for many this was to be short-lived. And I'll explain why. As such composite beings, we existed in a place of unselfish love or a constant flow and outflow. So, giving fully of ourself, of our life energies to each element of ourselves. I'm reading now from the book, this is not coming from me. Within ourselves and receiving within ourselves and without. So, in relationship with the one, which each composite being also orbited, creating this even greater composite being of the one. So, for the first time now, we had begun to separate within ourselves, and thus this actually created the 2 sexes, male and female. this all would have taken place within. And this is where I believe he's talking more about the energies of the masculine and feminine.
Mhm.
And then along with this consciousness came emotions, new emotions. So remember, all existed before was oneness and this beauty that we existed in. And now we're dealing with things like some are pleasurable, some are painful, however. So things like greed, envy, lust, excitement, fear, desire. Some of us vigorously strive to maintain a semblance of our consciousness of oneness, along with the new consciousness of separateness, and we were able to experience the emotions without being ruled by them. Such were the children of the law of one. So, those of
Mm.
us who figured out how to maintain this connection to our oneness, but also to understand this separate world that we were living in, is who created the children of the law of one, essentially. Then there started to be some dissemination within the Atlantean race and civilization, and a new, I'm going to say, socioeconomic or socio-political group started to form, and they became known as the Sons of Belial. And
Belial.
basically, Belial, the Belialians, they say. So basically, there are actually prophecies where they actually warn, and they're even in this book. I'm not going to read it right now, but maybe at some point I'll record this creation story so it can be listened to from beginning to end. But it talks about the Belialians being reptilian-like beings. It doesn't say, though, in image. It talks about their intentions and the fact that these beings were actually existing within the consciousness of separateness only. So this is where these two factions were created. And essentially, what we're looking at in present day, this war of good and evil, is really this war of oneness consciousness and separate consciousness. So these beings, and what really differentiated them was many things, but it was their intent, number one. Number two, the environment. So this was a very big thing in that, and this is spoken about in this creation story, that the Atlanteans did not harm the Earth Mother in how they used technology and how they created. But the Belialians unfortunately did, and they used generators to create great forms of energy, which is a big part of why the fall happened.
Right.
But this is where we're seeing it as well. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I just had heard before, and don't ask me where because all of this knowledge kind of builds upon itself for me over time, but
Mm.
I had heard, it might have been Dolores Cannon, that, that this I never heard them called the Balalians, is that right?
Yeah, so people say Baal or the sons of Bala. I think it's like the sons of Baal are derived from the sons of Bala.
Belial. So,
Yeah,
is that they were drilling into the earth to
correct.
yeah, and then they caused the flood because of the
Yes.
energy that they released.
That is spoken about in this story as well.
Okay,
So there
interesting.
are still some on the earth. One of the really famous ones is in the Azores, and I believe it's called like the Blue Hole or something like that. So some of them still do exist actually on planet Earth, in the Caribbean, in Florida. And yes, they were fully drilling into the earth. And I think this is where we see too, it's like Tesla, like Nikola Tesla, when he was trying to create forms of energy that would be free for the entire world, and that would not harm the planet. So
Mhm.
for me, this was an example of a child of the law of one coming back into our present time very clearly with a goal to support all, to
Right,
have ease and to have energy and to have power, but also to not harm our planet in doing so. And then it was
right.
Thomas Edison who came along and was like, cool, I'm going to take this, I'm going to charge for it. And here now we're all paying for power and energy, and they're trying to create a second lockdown where they're trying to scare the shit out of us. Sorry, I swore again. With fears of this being taken from us, right? There is no necessity to harm our planet to have energy or power. Not even a
Absolutely.
question. But here we are with our buddies. So I've gotten a little bit off topic here, but this is basically what the culmination of this creation story comes to, is that these two factions were created, and we are still to this day, and the prophecy states that, still to this day in this exact same, I don't even want to say the word war, but war, where we are here striving to remind other souls on this planet, that we come from this consciousness of oneness, that selfishness and separateness is actually, in reality, what is keeping us sick and unhappy and not in a good place on this planet. And if we can realize that, and this is spoken about as well in this prophecy, that governments are not going to save this planet, and it is not a governmental solution. The only solutions, he said, are solutions. So it is
Ooh,
literally up to us as beings
on a
to come
soul
back to
level.
this feeling of oneness. Yes, and you use that beautiful example, I believe, in the last episode or the one before that, where you spoke about the blood cell, that meditation that you
Mm,
do where, we started, even he speaks about in this creation story, to divide within ourselves. We
mhm.
started to separate within the self. Like what would happen if your arms and your legs stopped talking to each other, or the brain stopped sending signals? The body starts to fragment and shut down. So if we think of this in the macrocosm of it all, and we're looking at, our civilization or humanity as the one or as the whole, what have we done? Like, what can we do going forward? It literally starts here with you, with going within.
And this is what Thoth, that's how you say it? I call him Thoth.
There's so
And
many ways. He's
Yeshua,
also called the 3, there's so many
yeah,
ways to talk about him.
if you get into the Hermeticism, he's, Hermes Trismegistus.
Yes.
So, yeah, so, like, I've linked Yeshua to Thoth as well because Yeshua
Beautiful.
was learning from the Egyptians, and who the Egyptians learning from? They were learning from Thoth, right? The
Yep.
Atlantean. And so it's
Yes.
like you go back, so the Hermetics were learning from the Egyptians, Yeshua, the Essenes were learning from the Hermetics,
Mhm.
and we, present day, are learning from Yeshua, right?
Yes.
But this, like, Christ, the Christos, he, like, incarnated in many different forms, like Krishna,
Exactly.
to come and bring this message of salvation, right? To free
Mhm.
us, right? From the shackles of division is essentially what it is.
Yeah.
And that wisdom that he brought forward was to go within,
Yes.
come
That's
back.
exactly right, and this is why Egypt is so important, or Chem is so important in the evolution of humanity as a whole and the understanding of our history as a whole, is because this was the place we came to rebuild and where we actually came to save the humanimals. Like, it sounds funny to say that, or almost like a cartoon, but this is why the sound healing hospitals were created at Saqqara. It was to help these beings. And if we look at the Egyptian teachings, which I'm going to get into more in the next episode, they talk about these half animal, half beings. The Egyptians misinterpreted and called them gods. But in reality, they were neaters. They were of nature, and they were our teachers. They were very important. But they were also there to be healed and to be saved from this separation. And
Right.
and it's also spoken about in the creation story about the pyramids, right? And how that was an energy generator, and also very importantly and confirmed by these teachings, that the pyramid was actually an initiation site, the Great Pyramid, for the children of the Law of One. So this is
Mhm.
where you would go to be initiated, and I speak about that in our that first episode you and I ever recorded.
Right.
Right, when we do that journey to the pyramid. So, like, this is really now connecting and filling out this story and really understanding that it's like it's still going on, we're still doing this
Yeah.
work. We're
It's
back.
transferred from one civilization to the next, and, like, the flood was, like, essentially supposed to be a reset,
Yes.
but it didn't because the information was saved. And so, like, I've heard stories of, like, ancient Atlantis was actually the Americas,
Mhm,
and
I've heard that too.
South, when the floods were happening, was on Mount Shasta and took a spacecraft over, 'cause all of the Americas were flooded, took a
Yes.
spacecraft over and then took that craft and landed in Chem, which is now ancient.
Mhm. Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
And now I understand why I was just in Colorado and New Mexico in November, and now I understand why I was brought there, because New Mexico used to be underwater,
Mhm.
right? Like, if we think about these areas and what they found, and it's same with Egypt. Parts of Egypt were underwater, but I now understand why I was brought to that land, because I think it's filling out a piece of like this puzzle of, this truth that we're seeking. And basically going forward, and what's confirmed is that like we are here on this mission, or we're here to continue this mission, I should just say. And now, having said that, there's so much more I could say about this, but I would love to hear from you, like the Gnostic teachings. And
Yeah, there's a lot of
I'm
overlap.
hearing overlap, right? And like even just in when I was talking about the fish human beings, I was just picturing like those Sumerian dudes with the
Yeah.
purse.
Anki.
I know it's not the
Yeah.
purse. And
The half
yeah,
fish
Enki,
man.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
that
so
oh my gosh,
now
and I could
please.
talk about that, but I'm gonna talk about the Sumerians and the
Yes.
Anunnaki next episode.
Yes,
But
sorry.
there's absolute crossover because then like, because 'cause we're comparing the different incarnations of Yeshua just then, and, like, so you
Exactly.
go so pre-Thoth was Enki, was another incarnation
Mhm.
of the same being, and so this brings us into the Gnostic story, right? And so many overlaps when you're talking about the Atlantean creation story with the Gnostic creation story, and also the symbolism that I'm like that's just, like, coming to me as I'm, like, listening to you describe the split, and, like,
Yes.
you think of, like, an embryo, like, at conception in a
Mhm.
womb, right? We start as one single cell, and
Yes.
then we split and we divide into 2, and then 4, and then 6, right, or 8, and then we just keep dividing and multiplying, and so it's like as above, so below. Hermetic principles is like everything that exists in the macro exists in the micro. And so it's like
Yes.
just in the spark of like physical life shows us exactly how the universe started. It was a single cell splitting to witness itself. And so the Gnostic creation story. So the Gnostics were deemed as heretics um, in because, so basically what the Gnostics believe is that the Earth is a prison planet and that we are in hell currently. And so how this came to be is that so the original creation of life itself started as a single cell, okay? And so they called this the monad. So the monad is the creation of all creation. It is where all life starts and comes from. Now, the monad wanted to experience itself, and so it created the pleroma. And so within the pleroma, so what happens is it starts separating and dividing and it creates the aeons. So the aeons, so in the very center is the monad, and then it starts to move out. Like I just kind of visualize like an egg yolk, right? And then the whiteness around the egg is like the pleroma, and then within the pleroma are the aeons. And so the aeons are formed with female and male. So they're formed in twos, and so they're formed in balance of this masculine and feminine energy. Now, the very last aeon that's created is only female, and she's known as Sophia or wisdom. And now she's created without a male counterpart. But she also, and so then the aeons can go and create on their own as well, right? So that they can continue to divide. And this is all in the etheric space. This is not yet physical. So Sophia, wisdom, wants to create a child for herself. And so she creates a child without a male consort, counterpart. And this, like, can also overlap with Mother Mary and Yeshua. However, so she creates what the Gnostics refer to as the Demiurge or Yaldabaoth. So she creates this without divine harmony or balance between masculine and feminine energies. So what she creates is a physical being who's essentially described as a monster. Like because he's not balanced within feminine and masculine energy, he comes out and he is wreaking havoc. And so she tries to hide him from the pleroma and the monad. So she sends him to the earthly realm. And so within this physical realm now, he arrives and he is unaware. So this is where that amnesia comes in. He is unaware of where he's come from. And so because he's unaware of where he comes from and he's the only thing, he perceives himself as the creator, as the true God. And then he creates what's called the Archons. And this is what is also you can overlap with the fallen angels in the biblical text. So he creates the Archons. So he himself is an Archon, but he's the ruler of the Archons. And so these are some texts describe it as 7 and some describe it as 12, which so 7 correlates with the chakras and 12 correlates with the constellations. 7 can also correlate with the planets. So they're assigned different roles in basically prison guards to keep the souls that they then start creating on the earth. Well, they don't create the souls, but the souls, it's interesting as you're talking about the Atlantean story, how they come because they want to experience separation. They want to see what it's like. So they come willingly, and then they don't realize that they then become trapped by
Mhm.
Yaldabaoth, the Demiurge. And so they start on this reincarnation prison. It's a sentence. And so every time they live a life, then they can't escape this physical earthly realm and go back to the monad or the pleroma, and the demiurge traps them. Now, what happens is in order for the light to get here, the spark of light, the spark of all of these different souls appearing in physical form on the earthly realm, he needs the light, and the only access he has to the light is through Sophia, his mother, wisdom. And so she still has this motherly instinct and wants to check in on him. And so when she checks in on him, he steals her light and then is able to plant that consciousness, that light consciousness, which is where we all come from, Sophia, which you'll hear a lot of people in the like new age spiritual community talk about how God is Sophia because we come from her. And so he traps this light of Sophia and divides it into different beings. Now, this is where there's more overlap, which I'll explain. This is like a super condensed version, and you'll find this Gnostic story. You'll find this in texts like the Pistis Sophia. You'll find this in the Apocrypha of John. You'll find this in the Lost Gospel of Thomas. So this is all a part of like the Nag Hammadi, which was discovered in, I believe, 1949 and is now in the Vatican archives, as well as the found and somehow taken from this unknown destruction of the Library of Alexandria. So, like, just happened to burn down all of the world's most vital information
Oops.
before, oopsies, oopsie daisies, before the burn of the Library of Alexandria. Somehow nobody knew that it was going to burn down. They were able to take certain texts and hide them in the archives at the Vatican. So, for you Christian and Catholic listeners, I would like you to ask yourselves, why is my religion hiding information?
Mm.
Anyway,
Very
I
good
digress.
question.
So the Gnostics basically believe that Yaldabaoth, or the Demiurge, is the ruler of this world, and he's trapped us to feed off of our light because he does not have direct access to the monad, the original light that we all come from. And so his only way to survive is to feed off of other people's lights that have carried it from the monad. Now, this is where I've, like, also correlated this because I've also studied a lot of the creation story in biblical text, and so this is where there's a lot of correlation with Yahweh being the god of this world, and he's basically the same as Yaldabaoth, so just a different story with a different name, but the same being. So Yaldabaoth and Yahweh are the same entity, but in the biblical text, Yahweh is presented as the God of all. But in the Gnostic text, Yaldabaoth is presented as a fallen angel who is deceptive. And in the biblical text, Yahweh is also deceptive, for he lies from the very beginning. He tells Adam and Eve, if you eat from the tree of knowledge, you will die. But they did, and then they didn't die. They were outcasted. They didn't die. They ate it and they lived, and he was like, "Well, shit, I guess I gotta kick you out now." So he's proven from the very first book in the Bible that he's a liar. And I'll have people, Christian apologists, they'll argue with this and say, "Well, they do die eventually."
Yeah, but
We were all gonna die eventually.
yeah.
Anyway, so I have heard that argument, the rebuttal back, but so essentially, the serpent appears in the Garden of Eden, and the Gnostics say that the serpent is a representation of Sophia, is when she comes to check in on her son, the Demiurge,
Got it.
Yaldabaoth. She comes to check in on him and see what's going on because she genuinely feels and harbors immense guilt for what she's done. And she comes in and she is the serpent and then witnesses this creation of men and women who were literally imprisoned in a garden enclosure at the zoo. She witnessed this and that her son is controlling these people and manipulating them. And so she whispers to them, "Look, eat from the tree of fruit of knowledge because you deserve to know where you've come from. And in order for you to know where you come from, you have to go within." And so she is the first and, like, I know how you've said multiple times in telling your story of the Atlanteans of how I like this story because it doesn't blame the woman. Well, what's interesting about the Gnostic story is that the woman is the redeemer.
The woman is the
So
savior.
yes, that's right. She comes in, and while she also is somewhat the initiate because she
Sure,
creates Yaldabaoth, right?
of
She
course.
also is able to recognize and reflect and say, "Shit, I fucked up. Sorry for all the swearing, mom. But I need to come back and I need to fix what I've done." And so this is where she comes in and tries to fix. And so this can also be perceived as the Christ. And so is this knowledge of like, okay, I'm going to come and I'm going to try my best to make this right. And so
Mhm.
she comes back as Sophia first. And then you can also like there's so many overlaps here that I've looked
Well, and
into
this
of
is
like Sophia and like Melchizedek
mhm.
and being a part of this, and like Melchizedek comes and also is like speaking of this truths of like, look, and Melchizedek is this being in biblical texts who's somewhat mysterious, but he's created without lineage. It's like it's noted and well known that he is created without father or mother, and so like who can be possibly created without father or mother other than the monad itself,
Hmm.
right? And so, or
Which I would liken to the Atlantean story,
right,
which I would like which is the same thing, right? It's like there is no father and mother, there's just oneness. And we
exactly.
divide from that wanting to experience, so it's and very similarly to what you spoke about in both of those 2 creation stories, the idea that we're here on Earth in relation to the Gnostic story, that we're here to fix a mistake that we've made
Mhm.
in our wanting to learn and experience and, feel, but then also that we are here like, Earth is a school, it is and I don't wanna say prison, but we are we fell into matter, we fell into that sensationalized separateness, right? So,
Yes.
yeah, like, the
Where
overlap is
but we can also experience pain and pleasure, right?
absolutely, yes. That
Yeah, and so the
wow.
Christ consciousness and, like, what Thoth came to do and what Yeshua
Mhm.
came to do, and this is what the Gnostics believe also, is that Yeshua came here to show us and you were explaining the Atlantean story, I was like, "Oh my gosh, the crossover is not uncanny because obviously it's there," is that it was, like, return to the oneness within, right?
Yes. Yes.
It's like the way back, and so, like, he came back as this way to show us that in order to transition out of this entrapment reincarnation cycle, we
Mhm.
have to become in aware and into our knowing, our innate knowing that lives within inside of us, and so
Yes.
it's only then, and this is what the Gnostics believe, the only way to transcend this prison planet is to become knowing, which is what Gnostic means is knowledge,
Correct.
right? Is and so not ironically, of course, Yahweh, the God of the Old Testament, told us not to eat from the tree of knowing.
Yes, of course.
Mm. Because he's like, "I don't want you to I need your light. I need to feed off of
Yeah.
your light." Yeah.
Yeah, that's like
So
our Canadian government censoring all of the truth in our world and creating bills to do so.
yes.
Sounds
preventing
pretty much
knowledge.
like a microcosm and a macrocosm to me.
And, like, why they poison the food and poison the air with chemtrails, and
Yes.
they do all of these things that they and vaccines and all of these things that they can possibly do to shorten our lifespan so we
Yes.
don't reach knowledge. Because the longer we live, the
Yes.
more likely we are to reach gnosis.
Correct.
And when that happens, when enough of us, which I do believe has already happened,
Mhm.
when enough of us move in, and this is like 1% of the population, that's all it requires,
Mhm.
is we move into gnosis, means the light is withdrawn from the dark, from the evil forces. What were they called? The Balians?
Belialians.
Yeah, which is
Sorry.
so interesting because then if you go into, a Canaanite history and they worshipped Baal,
Yes.
and so it's like,
It's what
is
it's
this
derived from for sure.
for sure, it has to be.
It
Um,
is, yeah.
yeah, and this is where, like, Rh negative bloodline, oh, that's a whole
Mhm.
other rabbit hole, comes
Like
in.
I sang an oratorio, it's the story of Elijah. We know that story if you know the Bible, and my character was Jezebel. So I was
Mm.
literally playing like a child of Baal in this oratorio work and playing the evil queen essentially, and it's like
This was the
this is where
opera
it
you
came
just did?
from. No, this is an oratorio work. So for those of you who are into classical music, Mendelssohn wrote this really beautiful piece called Elijah, and its oratorio work is basically where we tell these sacred stories and we stand and sing. So it's not fully staged, it's not with costumes. It's just like orchestra, choir, soloists. And there is one called Elijah, and it is the story of Elijah specifically. And there is a section where Jezebel, the queen, is basically demanding and encouraging the people of Baal to, you know, worship false idols and to go against the teachings of, you know, what we know is the one or the creator. It was for me singing the sacred texts as a classical singer, I see a lot of crossover and really interesting teachings from this spiritual world that I exist in music. And I think a lot of those composers knew and what was
Mhm.
going on, and yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt to talk about opera, but or classical
No, I
music, but
love
it's
that
like
because
it's in the literature.
and because of frequency, right? And, like, how
Yes, yes,
frequency can be a conduit to open up channels. And so it's like, if
exactly.
you can deceive people through frequency, it's much
Mhm.
easier to control them.
And the most performed classical work, not Elijah, but is the Messiah. So every Christmas and every Easter, I have multiple jobs usually to sing this same work, and it's still done to this day, and it's the story of Jesus's life, right? But it's the way it's
But what
written.
version of his life?
It's the version that I don't think you or I feel is the true version. But that's where I laugh because I'm going, this is being hammered into us with text and now with music, and still to this day is performed every Christmas and Easter in multiple, like, you know, I'll have one gig in Hamilton, I'll have one in Toronto, and then I'll have one in Guelph, right? And I'm doing that all within a couple weekends. And we're doing it over and over and over and over again. And we're hammering in this idea of what we are told Jesus's life is and that he died on the cross and he was sacrificed for our sins and et cetera, et cetera.
Promoting blood sacrifice.
Yeah.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
tell me
But
how
musically, so it's pretty.
that blood sacrifice is not
Hmm.
of the devil, is not of Satan. Like,
Yeah. And
how do people come to like, this is, like, a point of contention for me in, like, Christianity because I deeply love Yeshua. Like, I so love him, I love
yep,
what he stood for, I love his teachings, and I appreciate Christianity because I do believe it sparks Yeshua's life in to the
it
hearts of
came from
so
these
many people.
teachings.
It
It came
did.
from the children of the law of one. It just got broken telephoned
It's so
and
absolutely,
selectively
manipulated.
broken telephoned.
Exactly. Where
Yeah.
where the truth, the kingdom like, if you take nothing out of Yeshua's teaching, but the kingdom is within,
Within. Yeah.
like, if you take only that, that's all you need to know, is the
Hmm.
kingdom is within. Like, the path to salvation is through your own heart, your own heart. But the Romans were like, shit, like, we gotta kill him because
Yeah.
we don't want
Yeah.
people to know what's going
Mhm.
on. We don't and the symbolism of doing it on a cross.
Of
Oh my
course.
god. This is like, if you look at, like, the cross, so this will come into next week's episode because we're coming up on time here. But
Mhm.
in next week's episode, I'll definitely come back and circle back to this. But the cross is from the Anunnaki. This is the
Mhm.
planet of the crossing, is what Planet X, the
Yep.
Nibiru, their planet is called, the planet of the crossing. And this is where they freaking blew up Tiamat, and
Mhm.
Earth became a subject, became what was left of Tiamat was Earth, and the rest of Tiamat went into the asteroid belt, and then some parts of it went out into outer space, never to be seen again. But they literally used the cross as like a ha when they crucified
Yeah.
him. Like it wasn't, and then people carry that around their necks.
Exactly. Do we
Yeah,
know what
where
the
it's
original
like
cross looked like? Because I do.
the
And we're
Ankh.
going to talk about that next week. Yeah, bingo. So,
Yeah.
like, it's funny because next week we're talking about the Egyptian creations, not next week, but next episode, the Egyptian creation story. And I'm going to talk about the Ankh and what the Ankh represents and why it's created the way it's created and why it was the original cross and to me still is. Um,
Yes.
but again, going back to why chem is so important in this
Well, yeah,
story.
and like and Rome, like the Romans just
Yes.
completely butchered what Yeshua's message was in
Yes.
order to continue to control the Baal worship that
Yep.
Yaldabaoth, Yahweh,
Hmm.
was, right? It was all
Yes.
about this worship of separatism, pain, sacrifice. And it's like, you don't have to sacrifice shit to get to the kingdom of heaven. You are the kingdom of heaven. It is
Bingo.
you. You are of it. So, anyway,
Hmm.
I get passionate when I talk about this because I
I
really
love
hate
it.
liars. Like, it's
Yeah,
so.
I don't condone lying. I
Hmm.
can tell when you're lying. I can't handle the lying.
Like,
But
why are we
those of
doing
us
this?
who yeah, like those of us who have really good truth meters are here to help
Here
you all
listening to this
discern your
podcast.
yeah, here, come listen to this exactly. But yeah, discernment friends.
Yeah. Anyway, so we'll wrap this up. So I hope that you listeners took some really insightful truths out of this,
Mhm.
and were able to see the overlaps and like how important it is to just to look at different lenses in order to find the truth of, the
Agree.
crossovers where things come in. And so yeah, thank you for being here. And we just want to do a little bit of the housekeeping stuff too, because we did get some
Mhm.
more feedback. And with the subscription or the membership portal, it's only available on Spotify. So if you're listening to this on YouTube, you're going to want to go over to Spotify. And the membership is where Stephanie and I are bi-weekly releasing healing episodes. So every other week, you'll get a healing episode. It'll be one for me, and then one from Steph, and then one for me, and one from
Mhm.
Steph. So this is $5. Or it might still be $1 at the time you're listening to this, but it will be going up to $5. So you can get in for $1. But it's a monthly fee,
Promo.
so
The
$5.
promo fee.
The promo fee. $5 a month is like a coffee a month. Not even, because coffee's like stupid
Yeah.
expensive now because of energy. Thank you, Trump and Iran. Super appreciate that.
Oh, on
Anyway,
another
so it's
episode,
it's
we'll
a
discuss. No.
no-brainer. We do
Agree.
need to like do some current events episodes too, because that would be
Oh,
that's
they're coming.
yeah, maybe we'll do that after this series. So anyway,
Yeah.
if you want to sign up for the membership, when those episodes are released, you'll click on the episode and there'll be a link within that episode for you to sign up for the membership. You can't actually sign up on our main page. You have to go to the members only episodes, and then you can sign up and it'll just be a reoccurring fee.
And don't forget to like and follow and subscribe, whether you're listening on YouTube or on Spotify. And if you feel so called and you really want to tell the world how awesome this podcast is, please give us a 5-star review. We would love that.
Yeah. it boosts us in the algorithm, so more people need to
Yeah.
know this. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think so.
Well, thank you, Steph, and thank you all of
Thanks,
the
Mel. It
listeners.
was fun.
That was so fun. Okay, may peace be with you all, and we will see you next week.